Yeah, so a lot of people don't understand how family courts work and what the incentives are in family courts. People think of them as, an objective judge and this sort of thing. But the way that family courts are managed is they prevent you from presenting contrary evidence. That's why I've never been allowed to select a psychologist for my son. The courts will never allow me to do that. The courts pick the psychologist who will then present the evidence to the court, right? Now, fortunately, I've been able to record them. I've been able to gather evidence and actually prove that they perjured themselves, so they've had to throw out all this evidence. But it's taken a lot of work and it's cost me a lot of money to do that, right? And most people can't do that. So family courts basically work off of fabricated evidence. That's number one. Number two, there's really no appeal from family courts. So family courts, unlike normal, like civil courts or criminal courts, there's almost no appellate options out of a family court. So the judges operate with no oversight and just do whatever they want. And third, and this is the big one, there are massive federal programs that were instituted in the late 1970s that pay states trillions of dollars to tear families apart. So it's so innocuous when I tell you, be like, this is a great program. But like in Texas, we get 66 cents on the dollar put into the Texas Treasury for every dollar of child support that's paid. Right? So the state is now highly incentivized to issue the maximum amount of child support. That's why almost all divorces got 50-50 prior to the 1980s. And there was this skyrocketing of divorces where one parent loses custody. And that was to maximize Title IV-D reimbursements to the states. In Texas, it's $500 million to the Texas budget.
If the state is profiting off of child support?
Correct. And in most states, the Judicial Retirement Fund is funded from this money. So the more child support that's issued from the family courts, the larger the judicial retirement. It's a massive program. It's the size of the largest defense programs. So the incentives are absolutely huge.
To get people to pay child support?
Correct.
Even married people, to get them to break up and then have to pay each other child support?
Absolutely, yeah. So because you would think the best child support would just be 50-50 custody and let people raise their kids. The best child support is to raise your own kid. That's the best child support. But they don't do that. Most states actually have laws prohibiting the courts from doing that. Texas has a family code in which it's assumed to be in the child's best interest that one parent get 24% of the time. And the reason 24% was chosen precisely is it maximizes Title IV-D reimbursement to the state at 24%. Okay?
How's the maximization function? How does it come out at 24%?
So it has to do with how the state calculates child support. So Texas has one of the worst child support systems in the state. It doesn't take into account the income of both parents, and it doesn't take into account the amount of time you spend with the child. So there are fathers out there with 49% of the time that are paying maximal child support still.
Wow.
But again, that maximizes the reimbursement to the state. I have a friend of mine, him and his wife came to an agreement to do 50-50 parenting, no child support, because he watches the kids a lot while she travels for her work. And so it all worked out, and they decided it's just better to do it this way. The state of Texas sent an attorney to argue in the case that they should not be allowed to do 50-50 custody.
I read a story about some celebrity guy who had to pay massive child support, and then he and the wife both went to the court together as friends and said, hey, he's no longer working and doesn't have this money anymore, so we both agree it should be lower, and the court said no.
They won't do it.
Because they get a cut.
They get a huge kickback, yeah.
Wow.
Now, there's an even more evil program that's related to this, Title IV-E. Title IV-E pays the states to adopt out orphans.
What do you mean adopt out orphans?
So
like
whenever CPS takes a child from someone and then adopts them into a good family, they get Title IV-E reimbursement funds, and it's a lot of money. It's like $50K per child.
The state gets that money?
Yes, it goes into the state budget.
And where does it come from?
Federal government.
Interesting.
Yep. So what will happen in Texas is some satellite office of CPS will get low on budget, and they'll go and find a white baby under 2 years old, no medical problems, from working class parents who can't afford a lawyer, and then they take the child and adopt it out, and then they get $50,000 for their budget. That's how they do it.
Wow.
There's massive incentives to split up families in this country, and that's why you've had the explosion of divorce and rancor. So now you have the majority of children in America are being raised in fatherless homes. We passed 50%.
It sure does seem like there is a system in place, whether intentional or not, to reduce the population.
Unquestionably. This is the whole you talk about this, you call it a conspiracy theorist, right? But they're blatant about it. They're absolutely blatant about it. But I think the agenda is not only population reduction, but also to reduce the political power of the middle class, right? If you've been to Europe, most of you have been to Europe. I've been to Asia a lot as well. Nobody cares about free speech there.
Yeah.
Nobody cares about gun rights there. There's one place in the world where people care about free speech and gun rights, and that's the American middle class.
Yep.
They have to disempower the American middle class to get rid of these things. And so the best way to do that is to take fathers out of the homes.
Yeah, well, that's where you start breaking society down.
That's right.
Destroying the family unit.
100%.
I mean, there's also definitely marriage disincentives.
I blame Reagan.
We were
no-fault
talking about
divorce.
no-fault divorce.
Yeah.
But there's also all of these, there's tax breaks for you if you're a single parent.
Yep.
And then if you're married, you don't get those tax breaks.
That's right.
Wow.
And it's a lot easier to get onto state-sponsored health insurance programs unless there's two of you. If you're married, it's harder to get on them because you automatically make a little bit more money.
Yep. In Texas,
but if
you
you're
can't
single,
if you're
you
married.
can.
Yeah. And
You can't get on the state plan.
There was something about this I learned earlier that in Texas, I believe it was you need both parents to consent to some sort of transgender surgery for a child. But then your wife or your ex-wife took the kid out of the state in order to bypass Texas state law. So at that point, you would think Texas would be like, hey, hell no, that we're going to the federal government. Come on, step in. You can't just leave our state and then break our law against the will of one of our state citizens. I would think that would be the case.
yes. My case has been carefully reverse engineered by leftist lawyers, it's very clear, to prevent me from taking a federal course of action. What they did was, since my judge issued an order allowing her to move to California, it's very difficult for me to go into federal court and challenge a local judge's ruling. There's something called the domestic relations exception in family court, in federal court. A lot of people don't know this, but the federal court just has a rule. They don't take family court cases. They just don't take them. Like I told you, there's no appeal out of family court. You're doomed. Whatever the judge says goes, and federal courts won't take them. There's a very narrow exception to that on civil rights grounds, which I might be able to pull off.
What would that be?
So there's a really good U.S. Supreme Court decision called Troxel. And Troxel establishes 14th Amendment protections for parenting your children. And all of my judges' rulings violate Troxel. So I'd have to get into a federal court. And the big challenge in federal court is it's very easy to dismiss federal cases under Rule 12 of Federal Rules of Civil Procedure. So I'd have to really build an airtight case that would survive a dismissal challenge.
And it's the
I'm
violation.
thinking about that right now.
A violation of the 14th Amendment.
That's right. Yeah.
Is
And what's interesting is in my 2019 trial that I won, I got 50-50 custody, no child support, and I got 50-50 on all the conservator rights. So she couldn't do any medical procedures without my permission.
I think I remember hearing about that in the news.
Yeah.
But then how did she end up getting to move to California?
Here's how it worked. So she retained the most powerful law firm in the state of Texas, family law firm named Coons Fuller. They're also the largest donor to political campaigns. So Texas has a loophole that you can buy judges, essentially, as long as you donate to political campaigns. Political activity is protected, and law firms cannot be recused from representing in a court, even if they gave them a lot of money. So they gave my current judge over $30,000. Okay, $30,000. So in a transparently corrupt recusal proceeding, they bought a judge emeritus to hear a recusal hearing. And all the judge where I won the trial, her name, it's a 255th District Court. All she did, she went on to Facebook on the official page of the court and said, everyone in my court got a fair trial. Which judges are allowed to say things like that. They're allowed to assure the public that they're performing their public duty. That's not recusable. But on that basis, they recused her. And then I wind up in this other court that this law firm gave $30,000 to. And this judge then systematically stripped me of all my parental rights using temporary orders, which is not legal in Texas, but I have no really course of appeal. In Texas, you actually cannot appeal family court decisions. You can only mandamus them. You can't actually appeal them.
So using these temporary rulings, she's
Systematically. And what's interesting...
But then she moves to California
yeah.
as a temporary right?
And so they want to go to final trial now and establish that as a permanent right. That's the idea.
Well, and the thing with California too is California has decided that they have no obligation to follow the laws of any other state.
That's correct.
So if by some miracle you ended up having a Texas court say that your sons should come back from California, California would refuse on the
They won't
basis
send
of
them
their
back.
own law.
They won't send them back. They are obligated by law to give my son gender affirming health care. They have to give it to him. And a judge can consent without either parent consenting. A judge can consent.
That's a Scott Wiener,
Yep.
State Senator
Yep.
Scott Wiener.
Do you know if they've begun any medical procedures, chemical or
No, because
surgical?
I don't get any information. So she's been there since end of December, and I have no information on my son at this point.
It's just, this is a federal, we need the federal government to step in.
The only issue with the federal government stepping in is you have the President of the United States who is in favor of child sex changes.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.